Is there enough money coming into the regulators for hydraulic fracturing regulation in New York State right now?
No, absolutely not. But I can assure you, if you went around to upstate New York and you talk to people about DEC and the speed at which DEC processes permits, you would find that DEC is not known for acting very swiftly.
How important is the development of shale gas?
It's important for the environment, obviously, if it's done right. It's important for the economy, not just in terms of the direct jobs that are employed by the oil and gas industry, but the fact that the gas prices are down to the levels that we're talking about right now, we have a situation where a lot of industries are coming back to the United States. The Chemical Association estimated that 400,000 jobs are going to be created, $132 billion in economic impact, and that this is going to also increase a lot of tax revenue. So there's plenty of things that are positive, but for the people in the audience and for the people that for the public that Stu correctly pointed out, needs to have reassurance. We need to have that public trust and acceptance of hydraulic fracturing for this to really make sense. And quite frankly, the industry has not done a stellar job of being transparent and help with that understanding.
Why? Why is there such resistance to increased scrutiny? Why this lack of transparency?
Well, there's a couple of different reasons for that, and I think one of those is that a lot of people in industry are say to themselves, thinking with their left brain, that it's impossible for this to happen. Why should I even get engaged in that discussion? Because it's not possible for fractures created down at 6,000 feet to migrate up to 500 feet or 1,000. That's the way they think. And unfortunately, some others think, in connection with the frac fluid disclosure issue, that if they just say, no, I'm not going to do it, then they don't have to do it. And they don't realize that that's one of the things, one of the two things that I would point out that has really put industry in the position that it is, and also make this very caustic environment for trying to resolve these issues. Is the agonizingly long time it's taking to resolve the frac fluid disclosure issue.
Because, I mean, this gets cast as essentially jobs, and we don't have to buy this energy from countries that don't like us. This is a national security issue versus people's health and safety and community, water pollution. False dichotomy?
When you say false dichotomy, do you mean we have to choose one or the other? Then I'd say, yes, it's a false dichotomy. The start is collaboration, and it is. And it's you people coming out this evening to listen to what we have to say, to make your own assessment as to whether or not you believe what Bowling is saying, or anyone else on the panel, and that is a very important part of it, the public involvement. Equally important is the environmental groups, industry, and regulators. We all have to be a part of the answer. The solutions are out there, but it's not going to be found just by industry. It's not going to be just found by the regulators. It's going to be found through a collaborative effort. I think that's a lot of the issues that we've seen up in northeast Pennsylvania is because of some of the shallow producing zones and some of the problems that they cause. What can happen is when you're cementing across that shallow producing zone, if you don't use the right quality cement or put a gas blocker in it or something like that, what can happen is that time period when the cement is starting to go from complete hydrostatic pressure, still liquid, so it's holding everything in, and it starts to solidify, you can let little gas bubbles come out of that shallow producing zone. And if it does that, it can create its own little channel up into what they call the space in between the formation and the casing is called the annulus. And in this example, what's happening is that gas is allowed to go up into the annulus until it gets to a certain pressure. It actually fractures right at the bottom of that surface casing, and you get gas to migrate out into water wells, out into aquifers, etc. I believe that this is a instance of explanation, anyway, of what has happened in several cases, both in Northeast Pennsylvania and Bainbridge, Ohio, and others. If the casing is not properly sealed off from corrosive zones or something, or let's say somebody is drilling a well and they, when they drill a well, they use casing that is not the proper quality, you can get a hole in that casing and the result is the same. This is an example of what happened in Garfield County, Colorado. When the well was being drilled, the target formation, it was not a horizontal well, but this still works. The target formation was a deeper one. There were several what we call thief formations. A thief formation means that it's got a lot of permeability, and when you're putting the cement into it, instead of staying in the hole, that cement's going out into the formation. So they thought that that cement top was up above, probably about 100 feet higher than it actually was.
It will generate out using additional factors, the jobs, the tax revenues, the various other things. The oddity about this model is that it only generates the benefits. It only magnifies the benefits. It does not tell you anything about the distribution of those benefits. So for example, some people get very rich, some people become homeless. Okay? It doesn't tell you anything about the costs, the environmental costs, the social costs, the costs to the localities because they're repairing their roads, any of the costs. New jobs created is they vastly overstate. Those are not new jobs. And they're mostly not jobs even in the shale fields often. In Pennsylvania, you know, a lot of these jobs are going, I hate to say it, to Texas. Or Oklahoma. I don't want to say that there are no economic benefits from this industry. There's no question that it does bring an infusion of cash into the communities where this is happening. But it also brings a lot of costs that need to be accounted for.
It has not been our experience in the Fayetteville Shale that there's been fewer jobs created than was originally anticipated. The University of Arkansas did an economic impact study about the projected economic benefits associated with our activities and other companies' activities in the area. And then what's more interesting is 3 years later they did an update and said, let's look back and now look forward to see how we missed it. And they did miss it. They underestimated the number of jobs. They underestimated the economic impact. And you know, and that's, I mean, that's great, and it's not necessarily going to happen everywhere the same way. One of the things that we identified before we ever got to Arkansas was the fact that if we didn't do something proactive to make sure the jobs were going to be in Arkansas, then it would happen, just as Deborah said, that it would go to yahoos like me in Texas and that sort of stuff. And what we did was we worked with the University of Arkansas Morrilton, a community college, and we funded a program to help people to get the skills necessary to get those jobs. And that has worked very, very well. But that's something that needs to be thought of and planned out beforehand, or else she's right, identifying the costs associated with the benefits. And that's something that on the advisory panel we're trying to get some information on as well, to try to see what that is like in New York, because I will tell you that there are negative impacts. I mean, it's just the bottom line. People don't like to have their roads messed up. They don't really particularly like all the truck traffic, dust, compressor noise. Things like that are just not a whole heck of a lot of fun. But, you know, I get, the other thing I will say about the economic impact, and that is, and this doesn't happen very often, but we will get some letters from time to time. And a lot of the letters we get is probably, you know, ones that I wouldn't want to repeat here because I'd have to censor every other word. But we do get good letters. Someone who said that thank you for coming there because now I have an opportunity to send my grandchildren to college.
Typically, they're counting jobs in order to have an argument to subordinate some other concern, like the environmental concern, saying, okay, we're going to create so many jobs and therefore let's surrender on some of these environmental requirements that are going to prevent us from getting these jobs. And I think that that's a terrible and actually destructive kind of argument when we're looking at an issue this important. I think that trying to figure out the economic impacts and dealing with the inherent boom and bust aspect of this is important from a planning perspective. That if we recognize that the environmental and the economic development and the energy considerations are really partners with each other and none should be subordinate to the other, then we get into a mode where we're starting to plan. And I do feel obligated to say that it's really easy sitting here in a room in New York City to react when Mark says, well, people are saying this is going to save my farm. I conducted the hearings on this throughout New York State on the first draft, and I will tell you that the people who made the most compelling arguments about this, whether they were for it or against it, were the landowners. And here in New York City, and everyone was afraid of the water. There was a lot of people believe that the water is going to get contaminated because of this. It's actually not the case. The water issue has to do with money, not with public safety. But putting that aside, for a lot of people in upstate New York and other places, this will be a game changer. For some people, well, very well, and for other people, not so well. But you can't be dismissive of it, and you can't be in a room here in New York City saying, oh, well, those people who say this will let me keep my farm, that's industry propaganda. I can tell you, it is not.
What do you see are the factors that industry uses to calculate economic benefits, and what's included, what's left out?
I'm not expert enough to critique the methodology, except to reiterate what Deborah said, which is the externalization of the downside is a huge issue. But I can also say the upside is there, and it's really significant. I feel like I spent half the year in 2008 and 2009, in Wyoming and in Texas, and as New York was in the depths of recession, these places were booming, and there's a reason for that. And so there's a lot of benefit to be taken from this development. But Stu mentioned the boom-bust cycle, and I think that's another very real part of this discussion that doesn't come into the equation often enough. This is and always will be a boom-bust kind of development. I mean, Rifle, Colorado was a town of tens of thousands of rich people in the 1980s as the country sort of poured itself into oil shale development. And in the space of weeks, its main street was shuttered and the population had dropped to like 3,000 people. The town is decimated, and then it comes back slowly as we go into, in that case, a tight sands, deep gas drilling boom. The Barnett Shale, they've had a good run, a good 10 years in that part of Texas. But those wells are drying out, and Texas this summer faced unprecedented water problems. It has a shortage of supply while using billions for fracking, among other things. It's suing its neighboring states for access to water, and it will not have the same ongoing natural gas production, at least in that Fort Worth area, that it enjoyed for the last decade. They'll find it elsewhere, but for now, it's disappeared.